I'm Axel Cushing, Editor-in-Chief at GameLuster, and this is The Score, a weekly digest of news and commentary from GameLuster and around the industry for the week ending June 17th, 2023. The Federal Trade Commission this week filed for and received a temporary restraining order against Microsoft and Activision Blizzard after reports surfaced that the two companies, quote, represented that they may consummate the proposed acquisition at any time. As of the time of this recording, the merger cannot be completed until after 11:59 Pacific Time on the 5th business day after the court rules on the FTC's request for a preliminary injunction, or a later date set by the court. In response, Microsoft and Activision Blizzard have requested the court expedite proceedings regarding the preliminary injunction. Activision CEO Bobby Kotick apparently feels confident they will ultimately prevail, stating that Activision Blizzard's, quote, excellent legal team has been preparing for this move for over a year. At present, there's no indication which way Judge Jacqueline Corley may decide with regards to the FTC's case. The process will very likely push the proceedings past the July 18th deadline for the merger, though Microsoft and Activision Blizzard could theoretically negotiate an extension in light of the unresolved legal issues. If Judge Corley grants the injunction, it will likely be of some benefit to the FTC's case to prevent the merger, since there would have to be sufficient evidence of potential harm to grant the injunction in the first place. Whether it's enough to permanently block the merger will have to be determined later this year. In other Microsoft news, Microsoft Studio Chief Matt Booty stated in an interview with Axios that they're no longer developing any new titles for the Xbox One console. We've moved on to Gen 9, said Booty, referring to the current Xbox Series S and X consoles. Support for ongoing titles like Minecraft will be maintained. Booty went on to state that the current Xbox S/X games are playable on the Xbox One through Microsoft's cloud streaming service, proclaiming, quote, that's how we're going to maintain support. In the same interview, Booty laid out that the development cycle for new AAA titles going forward was likely to be between 4 and 6 years, owing to increases in difficulty for reaching increasing levels of visual fidelity. But he indicated that, given the way studios are managed at Microsoft, this will ultimately be beneficial. Booty stated that his team attempts to strike a balance between fully centralized decisions and letting studios run themselves, telling Axios, we optimize for creative output, which can have some pros and cons, sure, but that is the goal. While the recent Xbox Showcase presentation certainly showed a good deal of polish on long-anticipated games like Fable and Starfield, as well as newcomers like South of Midnight and Clockwork Revolution, it's difficult to square this management style given recent stumbles such as Redfall. We'll have to wait a bit and see if we've witnessed a transitionary period in Xbox titles, or if there are fundamental issues within the company regarding how it handles its studios. With the end of the Summer Games Fest cycle, Sony has announced that they will not be attending Gamescom in Cologne, Germany this August. This will be the 4th straight year that Sony has not been on the show floor. According to a brief article on German gaming site GamesMarkt, Sony simply stated that they would not be at the show either on the floor or in the business section, giving no reason as to why they would not be attending. GamesMarkt also reports that Nintendo will be present at Gamescom, noting that its last appearance in Cologne was in 2019, the same year as Sony. Granted, from a logistical standpoint, it costs a significant sum for Sony to show up at an event like Gamescom, but the potential benefits from showing up, not simply releasing videos but actually meeting face-to-face, letting people get hands-on with new titles in a setting which you have a presence in, cannot be understated. Gamers already spend so much time physically separated from other players, showing up at a major show like Gamescom, which is historically more consumer-friendly than E3, could very well be a suitable alternative to touching grass. Embracer Group has announced a series of leadership changes as part of a radical restructuring program intended to cut costs and improve profitability. Saber Interactive CEO Matt Karch has stepped down from his position at Saber, as well as vacating his seat on Embracer's board, to become Interim Chief Operating Officer. Meanwhile, Crystal Dynamics Eidos CEO Phil Rogers will retain his position while also serving as Embracer's Interim Chief Strategy Officer. Embracer CEO Lars Wingefors has confirmed that project cancellations and studio closures will be part of the overall restructuring process, though he declined to provide specifics as to which studios and projects would be affected. Wingefors stated in an open letter, quote, during the past years, Embracer invested significantly both in acquisitions and into a strategy of accelerated organic growth. We have acquired some of the world's leading entertainment IP, and we have invested into one of the largest pipelines of games across the industry. The program presented today will transform us from our current heavy investment mode to a highly cash flow generative business this year. Last month, Embracer announced that a potentially lucrative partnership with an unnamed company, valued at some $2 billion US, had fallen apart at the last second due to unspecified external factors. Given this, it's not entirely surprising that they would be seeking to reduce costs in an effort to make up for the loss of anticipated revenue. However, the lack of disclosure regarding which projects and studios are on the chopping block is ominous. Some, like Gunfire Games' Remnant 2 and the remastered Rise of the Triad from 3D Realms, are likely to come through unscathed, at least in the short term. Others, such as embattled developer Tripwire Interactive and New World Interactive, which hasn't released a new game since 2018, may very well be on a countdown to elimination. Finally this week, while it's not specifically games related, it is certainly industry adjacent given the circumstances. Following an announced plan to charge access to its API starting July 1st, Reddit has been hit with a massive protest as thousands of its subreddit communities have gone dark, setting themselves into private mode in an effort to get CEO Steve Huffman's attention as to the potential downsides of his proposed revenue plan. And arguably, despite Mr. Huffman's assertions to the contrary, their efforts are at least making an impact. The protests officially started at midnight Eastern Time on Monday, June 12th. Several hours after, Reddit's website crashed and remained inaccessible for a period of about 3 hours. Let that sink in for a moment. A website crashed because a bunch of users turned off access to their content. That alone should be shock treatment to anybody thinking this is going to be business as usual. The Ask Me Anything event Mr. Huffman conducted on Friday, June 10th certainly didn't improve the mood. His responses were few, curt, and dismissive, none of which helped foster a sense of community for which Reddit ostensibly tries to achieve and maintain. This last week cannot be seen as anything other than an unmitigated disaster for Mr. Huffman personally and Reddit in general. You may be wondering, what exactly does this have to do with the games industry? Quite a bit, if you've been paying attention to how major game studios and publishers handle their community engagement the last several years. Reddit, for good or ill, has become the de facto platform for game communities to interact with, whether it's strategies or discussions of the state of a given game. Game studios aren't putting as much effort into traditional forums, and the ones who do maintain such forums aren't seeing as much traffic as a halfway decently run subreddit does. The Reddit blackout may also be a warning signal to anybody who believes they can simply make money off user-generated content indefinitely. One can easily picture Facebook trying to create captive revenue streams with their earlier metaverse plans. With the amount of snake oil salesmen still trying to pimp the unholy trinity of metaverse, Web3, and blockchain technologies as a panacea for all that is currently wrong with the internet, it's not hard to imagine similar scenarios coming about, and likely falling apart in a general sense the same way every time. Your site, your app, your API, all of those thrive only because they have an audience which makes use of them on a regular and consistent basis. What Reddit has done in the last couple of months, and particularly in the last couple of weeks, can very easily be described as the manifestation of filmmaker Kevin Smith's audience principle. The users, mods, third-party developers, and other individuals have been insulted and accosted by Steve Huffman and his decisions, and Reddit is very likely going to lose its audience for it. Lest you think this is simply a case of anti-corporate histrionics, consider the numbers which, courtesy of the very API at the center of the controversy, paint a very surprising picture. At the end of the official 48-hour blackout period, over 8,800 subreddits participated, with almost 29,000 moderators involved. That added up to almost 3 billion combined users across the subreddits. To perhaps put those numbers into perspective, the r/gaming subreddit has 37.1 million users, and is ranked as the third largest subreddit on the site. The largest subreddit, r/funny, has almost 50 million. Take just the 10 largest subreddits, and even assuming a certain amount of duplication, that adds up to a hell of a lot of users who are going to be forced to look for alternative platforms if Reddit ultimately drives them away, which in turn means a lot of potential revenue suddenly drying up. Worse, the various bots which are used for a number of functions across the site, a significant number of which are developed by third parties, are going to be deeply impacted by the proposed API changes. From some of the questions and comments in the Huffman AMA, the people who make and maintain these bots are likely going to be hit with a bill August 1st, 1 month after the API changes have been implemented. Anybody who might be thinking about chipping into the proposed Reddit IPO should likely be aware they're not going to get the sort of return on investment they've been told, or even as much as they might think. When the volunteer moderators of the third largest subreddit are openly telling the CEO, stop being the Kmart version of Elon Musk and start listening to your vocal and passionate community, one might want to pay attention. Indeed, the parallels between Mr. Huffman's behavior and hostility to third-party developers and Elon Musk's efforts over at Twitter are uncomfortably similar. However, it's unlikely Mr. Huffman will step down anytime soon, at least not until he's managed to do sufficiently grievous damage to the site and its revenue potential to be forced out. In the meantime, Reddit users are likely going to be looking for alternatives, all the while shaking their heads and recalling the failures of Dig, MySpace, and the recent semi-collapse of Twitter. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe. You can find other news articles along with guides, reviews, and features on our website, GameLuster.com. The opening music for the score was written and performed by Nirav Gandhi. I'm Axel Cushing, Editor-in-Chief at GameLuster, and this has been The Score. Thank you for listening.